From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. Hello, friends. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
And I'm Brody Ipox.
There we go. And we brought a friend today for episode 7. We're talking about work and traditional gender roles. And I brought my friend Jehane. Say hi, Jehane.
Hi.
Hi. So GG for short, GG for friends. So I know Jehane from the local cafe, and I told her, we got into a discussion one morning about work. And it so happened to steer into the laneway of like men and women. And I asked Jehane, because you're a criminal solicitor, is that correct? Defense?
In American terms, I'm a criminal defense attorney.
Nice.
But in Australian and English terms, I'm a barrister. So wig and gown, the whole thing, go to court, specialist advocate.
Yeah, fantastic. And so I asked Jehane, like, as a professional woman, what's been your experience in the workplace? And we had a really, really interesting conversation. And I went, pause, save that. I have a podcast. Do you want to be on my podcast? And she's like, yeah, I'll be on the podcast. So now here we are.
My response was, are you sure you want do you really want me on your podcast?
I do. She's like, I have a few controversial opinions. I said, look, you're a misfit like the rest of us. That's great. Yeah, so for some context, Jehane, and so people can get to know you, can you give us a bit of a day in the life of, a slice of what Gigi gets up to on a day-to-day?
Whew, okay. What now, currently, or my previous life?
Well, I know we couldn't do this podcast. I know we couldn't do this podcast last week because you're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. I had 2 murders at the Supreme Court. So, for instance.
Okay. So I guess before I turned 50, which was 3 years ago, my life was essentially chaos. I think that's probably organized chaos, sometimes disorganized.
Yep.
Of just fitting everything in, but obviously the focus was work.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to fit a family life in around that was hard. I think my kids are used to me not being home, and my husband's used to me always being at work.
Yeah.
Since turning 50, though, things have changed, and I think it's probably more the changes within me as opposed to the change in society, albeit that I think COVID was a good trigger for that change for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, yeah.
And within work.
Mm-hmm.
And so a day in my life now is probably more focused on, yes, I love the job and I do the job, and it's what pays for the things that we have in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I would like to think that I've got a little bit more work-life balance now than I did before COVID.
Yep.
And so a day in my life is still full, but it's not as chaotic because I think I've managed to find a bit more of a balance in my life. So I sing. Chris, I sing.
You do? You're in opera, correct?
That I've recently come back into. But, a typical day for a defense attorney or a defense barrister is, you wake up each day thinking about work and what you need to do for that day. You go to sleep each night thinking about work and what you need to do, not just for the following day, but for the weeks ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still immersed in work. It's just, I think the attitude is slightly different. It's not, I know now when to switch off and when to have a bit more me time. And I think that that's a real skill, no matter what your gender is, for anybody in this profession.
Yeah, I agree.
It's still chaotic, but it's just chaos with a little less, I guess, anxiety attached to it.
Just for curiosity's sake, COVID, we're talking about it a little bit. Did that affect you and your workload as much as, some of the other fields and industries? Did legal kind of take as much of a hit as everybody else?
Absolutely. But there was an adjustment phase. So for a lot of barristers being specialist advocates, our work is in court. That's our craft. It's like a surgeon. You go into theatre to perform your operation. for a barrister, you go into court to perform your craft. And so initially there was a huge hit for everybody who was doing hearings, court-based advocacy work. That obviously all just fell away in one hit. And there was a massive adjustment phase. People then had to figure out, and I'm not just talking about barristers, but practitioners, because solicitors, and I know solicitors has a different meaning for you guys in the States, but solicitors are legal representatives who aren't specialist advocates. So that's obviously an English description. And so everybody that had work that needed to be done in court and the court system all had to readjust. And very quickly, what we call short matters, so things like bail applications, sentences, stuff that could be done over a video link that didn't really need you to be physically in court. You could still do submissions over video. That was a very kind of quick turnaround of setting that all up so that could be accommodated and keep the court system moving whilst hearings and trials couldn't be heard, because obviously you need to be in court to cross-examine people. And so that all went on hold for a good year and a half. Those hearings, those trials just kept getting adjourned, getting put over. And so there's a massive backlog in terms of trial and hearing work still, but we're now back to normal, whatever that normal is in terms of running hearings and trials. But for about a year and a half, a lot of that work fell away. And so practitioners were really struggling just as much as everybody else to actually have work that they could do over the video link. And the video link system was really struggling to manage that load.
I think for anyone and everyone, it was struggling, whether it was schooling, whether it was, the weekly meeting. It's interesting to hear you talk about it, because I've not, crime doesn't sleep, Gigi.
No, it doesn't.
You're like Batman. So you just assume that it's, it's always work all the time. For a bit of color, can you give us a bit of a breakdown of the average sort of clients that you represent, just so people can get an idea at home?
I mostly do organised crime. So that's the main part of my practice.
For those people who can't see, Brodie's got the really impressed emoji face kind of going on, sort of strokes the chin. So it's kind of my thing. I like doing the organised crime because for want of a better way of putting it, they're a professional client. And so business is business, and they understand the work that I do, and they understand the parameters in which I do that work, and they understand the system in which we all operate.
Operating, whether or not it's from their perspective or from my perspective. And so dealing with professional clients, I really enjoy that work because they know the system that I'm working in. And so, and they're generally clients that, are informed and professional. And I mean, I don't want to strike sort of a comparison to what it would be like for lawyers who work in organised crime in the States, because obviously we don't have the mafia here. But if you want to strike a comparison, it would be like working for, I guess a better comparison would be outlaw motorcycle gangs. So I do a lot of that kind of work. You guys have those.
Okay.
Absolutely. Types of clients in America. And so,
upstanding gentlemen, fine moral citizens, all of them.
Allegedly. Those organizations. And so that's the kind of work that I do. The people that come to me are solicitors who have clients who are allegedly part of these criminal groups. And so they do tend to be large matters. They do tend to, center around certain types of issues and certain types of legal arguments that I'm a specialist in. The other thing I do tend to do a lot of are bail applications. That was something that was not so much born out of, but became a big part of my practice out of COVID, because obviously everybody was stuck doing video links and And
Yeah.
I just, started moving towards doing a lot of bail applications. And so that appears to be a large part of my practice. If somebody gets arrested, I get a call. We want you to do the bail application. And so I might be like the emergency physician, where I get called to perform the emergency operation. And that's a large part of my practice now. So yeah, it's a different kind of clientele, because sometimes you can have somebody who's been arrested, who's never been in the legal system before, never gone through the criminal justice system before, but that can also encapsulate people who are repeat clients, or
Yep.
people who are allegedly part of a bigger, broader criminal organization. And
So
it's great.
So on that, I'm intrigued then, because this is sort of, I'll put my second question first. In this case, and given the sort of clients that you have, and we're talking about traditional gender roles and in work, have you ever had a client, refuse to work with you, or just go, well, I don't want a woman representing me. Like, I don't want a woman for whatever reason, decide I don't want you because a man would better represent in this case. Has that ever come up?
It's a funny thing, because like I was saying to you, Chris,
Mm.
when we were having our conversation, there are a couple of features to my answer, and I'll start with the first one. The first one is that I've never seen myself as a woman in law, ever.
I remember you said that.
I've never perceived myself as being a person who is a woman in law.
Right.
So for me, I've never really viewed my place in this possession as being a woman, but as a practitioner.
Yes.
So for me, I'm an advocate, and I've never ever seen myself as being a female advocate. And so I don't bring with myself to the job that perception of myself.
That's fair.
Does that make sense?
It does.
The other thing as well is that I've never found the fact that I'm a woman to be a disadvantage. I've actually found that to be an advantage. And so my own personal experience of it is that if somebody sees gender as an issue, it's usually an issue that has worked to my advantage as opposed to a disadvantage for me.
Okay.
So, for example, for an example, maybe in a domestic violence allegation, or
Yeah.
where there's an allegation of domestic violence, I've found in some instances, and I'm not saying this is generally, but I've found that in some instances, male clients will prefer a female barrister.
Yeah.
As opposed to a male.
That makes sense.
Because
more sympathetic?
No, I don't think it's got anything to do with sympathy. I think that it's got everything to do with the fact that I'm a female, and so I may better understand the allegations from a female perspective, and may bring to it, and I'm not saying that this is what I've been told, this is my perception of why it is that I've been told, look, the client wants a female. So my perception of it will be that it's because I am a female that I may better understand and may better be able to critically analyse the complaint that's been made.
Interesting.
And whether or not, as a woman, that would be the kind of thing a woman would do or complain about.
Right.
I hate to say it, but maybe I'm viewed as someone that would have a better meter for the truth.
Okay. Yes. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
So and to be honest with you, I think some clients might perceive that women might be more effective body language readers.
Okay.
Because of inherent biological wiring that requires us to be better biologically wired body language readers.
Sure.
The way I see I have a very, how can I say,
Go on.
controversial view about men and women.
You do.
And I'm trying to be politically correct whilst saying this, but the reality is men and women are different.
Yeah.
We're wired that way.
Yeah.
I don't deny the biology of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back to caveman days, and I know this is going to be a terribly unpopular thing to say, but if we go back to caveman days, men were wired to go out and hunt and bring back the kill to the family, and women were wired to stay back and take care of things at the, cave.
The social group.
At the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so to that end, men are wired to go out and hunt and focus very intently on that task, because that is critical to the survival of the group in terms of food and water and all those things, whilst women are intensely focused on the emotional health of the people that they're taking care of back at the site.
Yeah.
And so I guess we're naturally wired to read body language and understand the needs, emotional needs of the people that we're taking care of, being the children that we're having, or the people that we are taking care of back at the site. And so for me, I think that women can be, and I'm not generalizing, but women can be good at that because it's inherent in our biological wiring.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the reason why men are so good at intensely focused tasks, and why generally there's always a complaint that men can't focus on any more than one thing at a time, is because of our biology. And so maybe it's women are better communicators in that respect, albeit that I do, again, generalize, but I do firmly believe that there's a lot of wiring at play. And so maybe women are better communicators because of that, because they can pick up on body language better. I don't know. I don't know. That's my experience of it. And I think that's something I do.
So you've never been rejected for being a woman. Guys got tats all over it, or whatever the charge happens to be, and then you rock up and it's like, well, I don't want them. Because I know we had a brief conversation beforehand. I sort of raised this issue of like, well, what about the glass ceiling? So this discussion of sort of almost to your point, where like men would be genetically and generally more ambitious, more risk-taking, more all of those sorts of things, which that sort of ambition attributes to promotions and increased in salary and all of these sorts of things that aren't denied women. But there's a big, obviously a big discussion around, well, equal pay and gender bias on the board and all those sorts of things. And I remember I asked you about that. Like, is that your experience? And have you found that? So,
no,
yeah.
I don't have that experience. And it's funny. I think this might have been a story I recently shared with you at our local hang. It's an interesting example, because I think that people, and I'm speaking people generally, whether male or female or non-binary, come into, I guess, a work environment and maybe their life environment with their own perceptions and their own experiences. And I gave an example of something that I saw on Instagram. I think it was an Instagram post recently, or Facebook, where there was an experiment that was done where some women were going into a job interview. I think it was a legitimate job interview, but the experiment was that they were going into that job interview with a scar that was put on their face. And so they were makeup artists, and they put these scars on their face, and they didn't know what those scars, I don't think they knew what those scars looked like, but they were told that they were quite obvious scars. And that they were going into this interview with those scars on their face. But shortly before going into the interview for this job, each woman was told that the scars were going to be touched up a little bit with some makeup to make it look less obvious, to try and make it, not look as obvious. And little did the women know that the scars in that touch-up process were actually being removed. Right. And so the experiment was essentially what these women were bringing with them into the interview, mentally, as opposed to physically. They thought that they were scarred. They thought that they were the interview was being done with these visible scars on their face.
Yep.
So they go in, each one comes out, and then they do an assessment afterwards as to what
Mhm.
their experience of the interview was. And every single woman in that interview had complained about some level of discrimination as a result of the scar that was on their face. Little did they know that the scar had been completely removed.
It's
Now,
interesting.
my philosophy is, and please, tell me if I'm talking too much, but
No, yeah.
my philosophy is this, and I think this is probably the reason why I don't perceive having experienced anything in my life that's been some kind of discrimination due to gender.
Mm.
My philosophy is that people bring to them into their work and into their life the scars that they perceive that they have.
Mm.
And that could be for a number of reasons. And, there could be a number of legitimate reasons why they have those scars. But nevertheless, they bring those scars with them into whatever arena that they're in and perceive that people are treating them differently because of that, when necessarily that might not be the case. And I think that experiment was a great example of that, because they thought they had the scars, and when they walked in, they had a perception that people could see the scars. And so
and that's all they saw, and that was a factor.
And how they interacted with people in that interview came from a place of, I'm being dealt with differently because of my scars.
It is interesting that normally it's associated with like if we're rejected or if we don't get something or we miss out an opportunity, one of those sorts of things. The quickest and the most convenient answer, like for many, it can be race. I didn't get it because I was this when I was, or an even better one was when I was doing L&D recruitment for state rail, and for the guys that wouldn't get in, they would complain about all the Indians and Pakistanis being hired. So right, so then it's like, now it's my fault because I'm a white man who can't get a job because they're hiring all these immigrants. And it's like, so an immigrant who's from a different country, whose English is probably second or third language, is more qualified than you to, so, but the logic is, it's not my fault because.
Yeah, and I think there's that real I hate to say it's a generational thing, because I'm an X. What am I? Generation X. So I'm in my 50s. So I grew up in a generation of, if you falled over, somebody kicked you up the bum and said, get up and get on with it. There was no such thing as depression or anxiety or mental health or anything. You never complained, and if you did complain, you got to kick up the bum, and you were told to snap out of it and get on with it. And so we did. There were no barriers. You just had to get on with it. And my experience is that if you don't bring with yourself or bring with you an attitude that the world is against you, then your general experience of it, and I'm talking about my own personal experience, is that the whole world isn't against you, and that if you don't get a result, or you don't get an outcome, or you don't get what you want, my generation, and again I'm speaking generally, is, well, what did I do that is responsible for that, as opposed to
whose fault is it? Yeah.
It's like, well, what do I need to do to change that? Is there anything I need to moderate to address that issue? I think there's unfortunately a younger view of the world now, that nobody's at fault. Nobody's at fault for their own. I don't want to say failings, but
consequences. Let's say, like, be accountable. Yeah.
Nobody's accountable for their own path in life anymore. It's about finding someone else at fault. And I think there's a real issue with that. And I think that maybe the reason why I haven't had an experience of a glass ceiling is because I don't perceive one to be there.
That's okay. So while we're shifting back to work and sort of roles within, there's something. We're living in a day and age now where obviously men and women have equal rights to pursue any career and whatever journey that happens to be. But there's an interest. I thought of this interesting thing this morning. Like, we both sexes, well, all people have the right to work, but I'd argue that only women have the option whether or not to work. Whereas for men, and Brody, this is where I'll sort of invite you in to get your piece, is that like from the like adolescence, you know, like you're gonna work. And then a male's job is to be warrior provider, and that role hasn't really changed. And so the expectation is you will get educated, you will get a job, and you will provide, and you may or may not have a family or whatever it is, but that is a male's sole function.
Mm.
For a man to opt, well, I don't want to. And to take a direct example from someone at our local, Jehane, who, you know, young mum, first kid, husband works full time, and she is like, well, I don't want to work or go back to work, or, and it wasn't even like a time frame of, oh, because of the kids or whatever, but it was, she had the option. I know being a mother is a full-time job, well aware,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
right, but the employment is an option. So Brody, I'm wondering, like, for you as a man, as a father, as, you know, a guy who's been a partner to someone, like, has that been definitive in your role, what defines you as a man, and everything that's sort of associated with that?
Yeah, that's interesting to bring up. And if I'm moving from a place of honesty, I've been completely lucky with the partner that I've been with,
Right.
because she's been a provider as well,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an interesting dynamic that's shifting. And I think again, it's a generational thing. And what's hard about that dynamic is, we have a level of empathy and understanding and support for each other, right? But there's kind of a societal overbearing that's like, hey, he needs to be doing this and you need to be doing this, and if you're not, you guys are the outliers.
Yeah.
You guys are weird. You guys aren't accepted. That's hard to identify with. And I think that's been the hardest part for us both, because look, as I've been building this thing out, she's been working her own stuff.
Yeah.
She's got her own business that she's building. She's been working as a dental assistant, and that's a demanding field as well. So I haven't had the experience that most people have, where it's like, even though I have the family and I have the partner, that I'm secluded on that provider island and I'm left there to fend for myself.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard,
which is
and that's
arguably
kind of
more healthy, I would reason.
Absolutely.
Arguably.
I think so too. And it's helped both of us in our level of maturity. But again, like I said, there's that kind of like societal, influence that is at times hard to ignore, on either side of the fence. And that's where it gets kind of interesting with gender roles and generation, right? Because you have past structures and processes and emotional traces from generations before, and things have shifted. The dynamics are not the same. They just are not the same. And I think, in my own perspective, these gender roles are now more of a place that it's subjective.
Yeah.
It really is. How do you identify your situation, your partner in your life? And if it fits within the traditional gender roles, then sure, walk that path and feel grounded in that. But if it doesn't, right, if you are the breadwinner and you're the lawyer bringing home the bacon, and you're the woman as well, feel grounded and powerful in that, because again, the dynamics in the world has shifted.
So here's a question, and I'll swing it around to you, Gigi, because your husband, Chris, great name, he's a solicitor as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what's interesting. So let's imagine that, and this can be like either before you were dating or now, that like Chris in his role said to you, honey, I don't want to work. I want to want to go work in retail, or like be a part-time social media influencer, or pick it, right? But decided like, I have the option and I want to opt out. You make good money. What do you say?
I would have loved to have been able to say to my husband, you don't need to work anymore.
Right.
But it's just financially, it's hard. I mean,
Okay.
we live in an expensive city in the world.
We do.
And
Sydney's fucked, Brody. Like on the list of like expensive cities to live, it is fucked.
it's
Anyway,
backbreaking.
yeah.
But I mean, it's funny because just flowing from what Brody was saying about his dynamic with his partner, ours is the same. I'm essentially the one that brings more money into the household. My husband is the equivalent of a DA. So it's a government position. It's not as well paid because it is public. It's not private. I'm private. So I'm essentially the breadwinner, albeit that he makes a contribution financially to the household. But, for us, it's always been that I'm the one that's pursuing my career and that he'll take the back seat and take care of the kids when the children are born. And, and he did all of that. And it's funny because just talking about traces of the past and the current generation, one massively positive thing that I've seen come through in Australia, and I don't know whether it's the same in the US, is that in probably the last few years, there's been a massive push towards paternity leave for natural fathers.
Yes.
I mean, when our children were born, paternity leave for natural fathers, for biological fathers, was only 1 week. But in recent years, it's now 12. And so if a father wants to stay home to take care of the children because his wife is working, that's an option. And so talking about options in Australia, well, in New South Wales, don't know about the rest of Australia, but in New South Wales, that certainly is an option. And I think there are more men who are in that position of the reversal of roles where the woman is the breadwinner and the man is not earning the same amount of money as the wife and taking that back seat to her career. It's much more common here. I don't know in America.
Well, this is something that I wanted to grab a hold of because Brody and I had this chat the other day, and it's funny. It was also prompted by the same young mum I was talking about, where this concept of being high value, right? And it's normally attributed to like the high value men. And if you read between the lines, what you mean is like high economic value. As in, he's going to earn X, Y, and Z to keep you in the lifestyle that you've become accustomed to, and you feel like you deserve that for, I don't know, whatever reason. But what's not on this scale, which was fucking staggering to me, was like, but it's like, what's not on this scale is like, well, what about their potential as a father? What about their potential as like to be a partner to you, or even just a decent human being, or any of these other factors other than baseline salary is this?
You are talking my language.
Well, I thought so, but this is why I find it. This is probably why we're all misfits, and you're a bit of an anomaly as well. Because in the modern age, I'm unsure how many women would be secure enough or comfortable enough to say, well, I want to pursue my career and I'm okay earning more than my husband. And, for instance, I'll date the coffee boy. And the reason why this specifically came up was I was in the cafe, I think like Monday, Tuesday, whenever it was, Gigi, when I saw you.
I love that cafe, I tell you.
Right. Yeah. And minding my own business in the corner, I was chatting to this young mum, and then another mum came in. I know she's divorced, I know she's single, and she's kind of fine, and we have a bit of a vibe. Anyway, she left. And then the first one, so the first one kind of gives me the side eye. The first one kind of gives me the side eye, and she's like, what's going on there? I'm like, I don't know, she's cute, and I think she's dating a pilot, but I'm not sure, and it's not my place to ask, and whatever. And she's like, you should totally go out with her, and like, blah, blah, blah. And after she had a little rant, it was funny because this cafe, Brody, and for the folks at home, I'll make coffee there on a Saturday morning because it's fun and social, and it's good for my mental health.
Great place.
It is, it's great. It's guaranteed once a week, Gigi. So... the hot mum sort of knows me from the Saturday morning. So I'm aware that you probably just think I'm the coffee boy, even though you've seen the book that I've written, even though I know I do other things and you've probably looked up the site and everything else, but your first impression of me is coffee boy. And I said this to the young mum at the time that first impressions I kind of understand. And she's like, well, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything because if she's high value.
Oh my God.
Right. But I'm like, stop, like I'm fucking high value. Like just because she's climbing into like a Mercedes 4-wheel drive. And it was fascinating because the way she sort of started to explain things was almost back to your logic, Gigi, of like, well, guys chase and then women just sort of choose from the guys that are chasing, and that's the way that it is. And like, guys should pay for the first date, and basically the woman just has to show up, and this is all standard and this is all normal. And this concept of high value was based on what you earn. And it was fascinating just to listen to, knowing that we're going to have this conversation. Now, the irony was,
I'm holding back here.
you are. I can see like they're both twitching. Like Brody's like rubbing his forehead. And okay, actually, before I go on, what's your hot take? So we'll get a 60-second. We'll get your 60-second hot take, and then we'll get Brody's 60-second hot take. So Gigi, go.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna start swearing.
Lay it out.
Bullshit. I'm sorry. A person's value is in who they are as a person and how they treat people and how they treat their family. And so when you ask me the question, what would my reaction be to my husband staying home? The reason my reaction is, I would love nothing more than for him to be able to stay home, is because I love him so much that I want him to be happy and not be stressed. I'm happy to carry the stress because I'm a complete lunatic, and that's fine.
I can confirm.
Thrive on it because I can't have anything other than chaos in my life. That's how I'm wired. But my husband would love to just camp and, do the laundry.
Go out on the boat. Yeah.
Go out on the boat, take care of his family, cook for us, clean for us. He would be fabulous at all of that, and that would make him happy. He'd love to just go to the gym, come home, take care of me, make sure I'm mentally stable for the day.
And you're okay with that? Like, he'd still be a man in your eyes, and he'd still...
Why? Because he would be happy doing that.
Interesting.
And his value is at his core of who he is, that he is a kind, thoughtful, generous, emotional person who wants to make sure that his family are okay. That, to me, is high value. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect.
If I could earn enough for him to stay home, the first thing I would say is stop working. Go and enjoy your life, because if he's happy, the rest of us are happy.
Perfect.
Isn't
Brody?
that value?
Well, we're opening it up to the public. Brody, what's your hot take?
Well,
take a sip to calm down.
I can keep going for the next hour.
I know. I had to kill it somewhere.
I'm going to zip it.
I was literally twitching.
You were.
And that's the thing. It's such, again, I hate to blame it on the societal views and pressures, but like I think that's a big piece of it, right? And like, look, her definition of high value in my eyes was skewed, because when I'm looking at you, say it was me in your situation, you're coming out of a divorce.
Well, I didn't want to say
for whatever reason, that one didn't work. Mm-hmm. And you're going to claim to me that your value is at its height. No, no shot. There's absolutely no way. So for me, that was such a obligatory thing to say. Like, how do you go from basing someone's value
on money
and their potential in a relationship on a monetized standard value? That's it. Jesus Christ.
Bro, hey,
sorry.
Look,
absolutely. I mean, if relationships were based on what a person financially brings to the equation, and that was the only basis, where's the relationship?
Well, look,
it's about connections. It's all about money. Mm-hmm. It's about the connections you have with people. If I could sell everything and go camping for the rest of my life with my husband, I would be a happy woman. But we have responsibilities. Mm-hmm. That's what ties us to where we are and ties us to our careers. Apart from, we do enjoy what we do. But, if I could just give it all up and just spend the rest of my life on an island with my husband, I would do it. Because to me, the value that's the highest is the relationships that you have, not the money.
I have poetically taken that sentiment for most of my life, but only because I'm not I'm not wired in that way, and so I have never really had another option. It
Mm.
ties in, like, episode 1 for us was, what's the value and purpose of work, Gigi. So we touched on this a little bit in one of the earlier episodes. We talk about money, like, what is it good for? Like, is it driven, is that what should motivate you primarily, or is money really representative of freedom, or is it representative of stability, for instance? So this idea of today's episode about, if you're a woman, you can do this or this only, and if you're a man, your job is to do this and this only, and to be high value. Hopefully we've unpacked and debunked, or at least discussed a lot of it in a sane way, so people don't buy into the social noise, because this is an awfully hot topic. It's jargon, it's lingo at the moment, and this is, and being held up as something to aspire to, along with the social media exacerbates it. Social media exacerbates the lifestyle.
Terribly.
Right.
Yeah.
But and then the
ideal,
exactly, it's always a highlight reel. You never see behind the scenes. You don't see Jehane running in and out of the cafe like a whirlwind, trying to get everything, to be in court 45 minutes across town because she's been summoned and she has to have things, because someone needs bailout, and like, holy shit, and like, okay, that was the most intense 2 minutes of my life. But that's it is true, and that's the reality. But what's really, let me say this, as a man who probably identifies as a Renaissance man, and feel like there's massive value in that, and it's probably shifting back into focus given the current state of the internet and education. It's really validating to hear someone like you to say, well, no, I don't want what's being hyped on the gram. Like, I've got a quality man. He's a great dad, and I love him, and I love my work, because the other thing is as well, like, I adore strong, passionate women. Strong is relative, but passionate women about their career. Like, if you love turtles, fucking love turtles. Own that shit, whatever. But find,
be authentic.
That's
be
it.
Who you are.
All of that. But like, even that in itself is difficult to find, I think, for men or women. And that's what we've discussed a lot in series 1 about professional development, is like finding what actually works for you, finding what actually is going to drive you, not what's suggested on LinkedIn or like on the gram, or what your parents said, or what everyone think is best for you. Like, the hard choices come on your own.
Yeah.
But they're also the most, you're the only one who has to live with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right?
My husband.
But
right.
Oh man.
No. He's doing okay. So look, any final thoughts before we sort of wrap up this joyride?
I think
okay. Any advice for young girls, Gigi? Any advice for young girls who, like, professionally or otherwise?
Stop having expectations that
Ooh.
life is going to be a certain way, and that you deserve life to be a certain way.
Spicy.
There is no such thing. What you have to do is be true to yourself, choose the path that speaks to your soul and to who you are as a person. Stop listening to the noise and just be genuine, and life will fall into place. Don't have expectations of what your partner should be like, but when you are in a relationship, accept that person for who they are. Don't try and change them. And if they are the right person for you, then none of the noise should matter. Just be true in the path that you choose, and don't impose your expectations on others of how things should be. I think that's the best advice that I can give.
Pretty strong
for
statement.
Life, for work, for anything in life. Be genuine, be you. Stop with all these filters on Instagram, filters on anything, filters in life. Take that damn filter off and just be yourself, and just pursue life as an experience that is to be enjoyed and endured at times. And if you are in a relationship, you are in a team. It is not about only your happiness, but the happiness of your partner as well. And I'm going to sound controversial in saying that, but if you truly love someone, their happiness should be number one. And if you are happy that they're happy, then it seems to just bounce back. It's not that difficult.
It's a little poetic that you got sirens going off in the background.
I do. What's going on down there?
It's like the bat signal, like Gigi's twitching, like somebody needs me.
Get a call.
That's it.
The episode's minutes from being over.
That's it.
What's your take?
Brody, how would you wrap up for today? What would be your advice to your boys then, if, the same sort of thing?
It's, I hate to be redundant, but find somebody that loves you and accepts you for you, because that's rare in the world. And when you do find it, hold on to it and fight for it until you got nothing left,
100%.
Cause I think Gigi said it well, there's a fine line between, the relationship and the noise. And if you can separate them, if you can get them apart and you can look at that and you've got something, keep going for it, whatever that looks like, whether you're the breadwinner, she's the breadwinner, whether she, she's got more hustle and you want to stay at home, whatever it looks like, if it works for you guys, chase that.
And the little bit I'll add, sort of coming from my experience either in relationships or work or whatever, is it'll tend to ebb and flow as well. Like there's been times where it's been me, and there's been times where it's been the girl that I've been dating, you know what I mean? That like she's earning and rolling it in, and have me, as a guy having to adjust to that. Like, okay, like you can take me out for dinner. That's great. But and that's
nothing wrong with
no,
that.
there isn't. And that's the interesting thing. Like if I could encourage anything from this conversation, is for like all sides to be humble enough to accept that when it's offered, be gracious enough to understand that it's not the be all and end all of someone's worth or a relationship's value.
No.
I think that's the final sentiment, which we'll end on, because I think it's a sweet note.
It is.
So
Beautiful.
Thanks very much. That's episode 7. Work, traditional gender roles, right? Coming up next episode, funnily enough, we're talking about social media, Brody. So I know Gigi's excited, but this is Brody's wheelhouse. We're going to talk about basically what's the value of social media. Like, could we all throw it out the window tomorrow? Would we be better off for it? Why not? It is Brody's bread and butter, so he's going to have to make the case for it to stay. So we're going to have that conversation. Brody, you got any sort of hot insights you think we're going to end up debating next week?
I think my insights are going to surprise people. I think that it's a little less about the gimmicks and the shadows and the mirrors, and I think that's going to throw people off. So I'm ready for it.
Interesting. To be continued. Watch this space. Jehane, if I'm arrested tomorrow, where can people find you? Right? If I suddenly become part of organized crime, or if if someone allegedly becomes part of organized crime and they need to reach out to you for any reason, can the people find you on LinkedIn? Where's the best place to get in?
I'm on LinkedIn. My chambers is Trust Chambers in the city, in Sydney. So they can always just reach out to my chambers and find me. And I'm on the internet.
You're around.
Look me up.
It's Jehane Ghabriel, and Gabriel is with a Ghabrial. Or just follow the links that'll be, in this episode's description.
Contact my wonderful man from our local.
Just come down to Apache and we'll all hang out, and we'll get you set up. You can find any lawyer, any solicitor, any accountant, anyone you need for anything, any home repairs, you name it. On that note, it's a pleasure. Thank you. And thanks you for being here. Brody, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
ProMisfitsPodcast.com.
No.
All of my links are there. You can find me on LinkedIn or outside of art class on TikTok, and I'm likely to reply on either.
Nice. I'm there too. ProMisfitsPodcast.com. I'm also at cssellers.com if you want to reach out. If you want to buy my book. Gigi's got my book.
Oh,
That's
I
very
do.
nice. You do.
Fabulous.
Oh, you.
Fabulous.
So on that note, Jehane, thanks for being here. I've been Chris.
I've been Brody.
And you stay classy, Miss. You have. And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.